What I believe is common sense, I'm learning it's not that common. There is a lot going on in the world of politics, nationally, across the state, and here at home. And people on both sides of the aisle are trying to make sense of the current landscape and identify who they will look to in the future as leaders in local and state government. It's a topic I love to engage, so I brought two individuals in who also love to talk about all things politics, John Whitmer and Andy Hooser. Both of these two have leadership positions in the Republican Party. Both have conservative talk radio shows, and both are very opinionated and very outspoken on a wide range of issues. We talk about how they perceive their roles in the party. We talk about talk radio. We talk about their take on some issues and working on the local level. It was a fascinating conversation, and I hope you enjoy this episode with John Whitmer and Andy Hooser. All right, fellas, John Whitmer, Andy Hooser, thank you. I think we just had a podcast before this thing even kicked on and had a conversation.
We did.
But
that's the hard part of having radio guys come in. They're not going to stop talking.
Well, that's the thing. And normally,
and politicians.
Yeah.
Well, one active, one former, and
he's
recovering.
a politician. He's a city elected.
Allegedly.
That's right.
That's right.
So, look,
Yeah.
so I'm the only non-politician in the room.
That's
Well,
right.
It was funny. We were talking before. I was like, because normally when people come in, it's like we have to tell them, please get close to the mic, talking to them. And it's like we have a radio.
Now we know what we're doing.
All right, I want to tell you a story before we get started. And John, I might have told you this before, but my previous generations in my family, my grandfathers in particular, were pretty rabid Democrats. They had an affinity with John Kennedy. They were machinists and factory union folks, very working class people. And it ran really deep in my family historically, just not leftist roots, but very just traditional Democratic roots in my family until my father. My father is a very proud conservative Republican. And when you ask him, what are the reasons that you became a conservative and a Republican, there's two reasons. Number one, Ronald Reagan. My father was born in 1975. 1957, graduated high school in 1975, went off to the Army, went away, came home, economic turmoil, chaos, and Ronald Reagan painted a dream and a vision of optimism and hope, and rallied Americans around a common enemy, which was communism, and he believed it. Yep. So it was Reagan, and there was a second person, Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, yeah.
My father was a ditto head. Like, I remember him picking me up from school. Rush was going. He ran bowling centers. He was in the bowling business. He had something called Russian Bowl over the lunch hour, to where people would come in, pay $5 to bowl, and he'd have Rush Limbaugh playing over.
I remember restaurants that would do
Absolutely.
that. Limbaugh lunches.
This was my father's influences. This is what made him become a conservative. This is how he raised his family as conservatives. We've all chosen this worldview now. But it was talk radio, man, that really had the influence for a lot of, not just ditto heads, but a lot of Republicans and conservatives. Rush Limbaugh had such a stake in that and an influence. But here you are, you're both talk radio, you're Republican leadership, you're conservative talk radio. Like, how did you get in this space? And is it the same influence today as it once was?
Well, I got my start from him.
Well, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Actually, so poor Andy Hooser never got to take a day off because he's a one-man show over there. And so back in the day when he needed a day off, he'd need somebody else to fill in for him.
That's how he started filling in for my show.
Yeah, he would call me and he'd say, hey, I want to take a Friday off or something. Would you? And I'd never done it before, but I would fill in on Andy Hooser's show. And then after I lost my reelection bid, KNSS called me and said, hey, we've heard you filling in over there. Would you be interested in doing something? And I'd never done it before, and this was going on 8 years ago. And I said, well, I'm sure I'll try. And that's how, but I got my start filling in on Andy Hooser's show.
I'd never heard that.
I owe my start in radio
there we go.
To Andy Hooser.
Starting it off, and now look at you all over the place.
Well, how did you get into this?
Oh, my gosh. So that's a funny story. So I went to college originally for majoring in political science, but not knowing what to do with it. I wanted to be involved in politics. No idea where I wanted to go. I went 2 years. I ran the college Republicans. I ran the organization as the chair for a good year, and had no clue. I started running that, doing the adult beverages party and whatever. But
that's what I
ended
did.
up, not even going to college or not even going to the classes for a while. But
also what I did.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
At one point, finally, my sophomore year, the communications department. This was at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. opened up the communications department. They had an internet station for the university, a radio station, and said instead of just communications majors, anybody can do it that they want. So I said, I listened to Rush. Same thing. In high school, I would take my lunch breaks in high school and go in my car and listen to Rush Limbaugh.
Is that right?
That was the first guy that I listened to. Going to Mark Levin, all these other radio hosts that were out there. And I said, you know what, that would be fun. I'm going to try it. They put me in a slot from 2 to 4 in the morning.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, weeknights, 2 to 4 in the morning.
Oh.
I wasn't going to class anyway, so I was like, why not?
Hey.
So I did it, and I fell in love with it. It was terrible. The show was god-awful, but I loved it. So I dropped out and went to a broadcasting school, and I've been, I just actually hit my 10-year anniversary here in Wichita back in August of this year. I've been in radio in total now for about 14 years.
Man, that's great.
I didn't know you were a chair of a college, because I was the chair of the KU at the University of Kansas.
University of Kansas.
College Republicans, and at the time, there were 8 of us.
Yeah.
Because it's KU. It's the UC Berkeley of the Midwest.
That's right.
But
Bowling Green, same thing.
You know.
Bowling Green was the most politically active and liberal university in the state of Ohio, outside of Ohio State University.
Bowling Green.
Yeah, Bowling Green.
That's
and
right.
it was,
You're a Jayhawk too. I forgot that.
Yeah.
So you know what it was like.
I certainly know.
So our goal there, I'm sure you guys did the same thing, was at that time was not to really promote a lot, but to just be the thorn in the side of every other organization that was on there. And we had a lot of those. The one that ran the Latino organization there, he quoted himself as nicknamed the term Che Guevara.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was the type of people that we had to deal with in Bowling Green. So it was a lot of fun. We had a great time there. But yeah, that was my radio start. Was I did it in college, not knowing what I wanted to do in politics, but wanting to be involved somehow, and just fell in love with radio and dropped out and went to a broadcasting school.
Let me ask you a question. Historically, the thought process was that a lot of more left-leaning pundits and journalists kind of dominated traditional news sources, and yet
And still do.
But conservatives had their footing in talk radio, on the radio. Is that still the case today? And do you think that talk radio, conservative talk radio in particular, still has the same sort of influence that it once did?
Oh, I think it does.
Yeah, I think
very
so.
much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you were, and I'm sure you remember the network Air America back in the day.
Certainly.
I remember that one. So when I was interning in Denver, where I went to the broadcasting school, I interned for, I don't know if you know the guy by the name of Mike Rosen, 850 KOA, the big blowtorch 100,000 watt station out of Denver, Colorado. Mike Rosen had filled in for Rush a few times. I had listened to him when I went through high school in Colorado, listened to him, and he was a legend. Everybody, even people that didn't know politics, knew the name Mike Rosen. I got the chance to intern for him for 6 months.
Wow.
Which was really amazing. The same building that he was in was in Denver. There was a market at that time, 760 Progressive Talk, and it was the liberal station of Air America. And they had David Sirota. They had Ed Schultz, if you remember that, Randy Rhodes. They had all these progressive names. They went bankrupt because they can't handle, the progressive movement can't handle themselves in talk radio. When you're talking anti-private markets, you can't be funded by private industry when you're talking bad about that industry as a whole. They were so radical. The morning show host was a local guy out of Denver by the name of David Sirota. He writes for Salon.com, I think now. Go figure. He at that time it was so radical. He had said that Barack Obama was a flaming right-wing conservative and no better than George Bush. Like, that's how crazy these guys were. And you can't sustain on that type of rhetoric on the radio.
Yeah, the market won't reward that.
The market model won't reward that. So, yeah, conservatives, I think, still have a dominance in talk radio. And I think talk radio, we can talk about the future of the industry and the media as a whole overall, but I think that it's still very prevalent. It's very strong. And it's tying in with things like this, with actually podcasting and talk radio as a whole, the radio industry. If they're going to survive, which I think they always will, you can listen to a podcast all you want to, but when you want news happening at that moment, no doubt you're still turning on the radio to figure out what the news is.
Yeah.
That there's always going to be a spot for that, and talk radio and podcasting are going to go hand in hand, I think, for influencing content in the future.
Yeah, you agree?
Yo, without a doubt. I mean, look at, you mentioned podcasting. Look at how popular Joe Rogan is. Look at how he influenced the last election cycle.
Well, and that's why Democrats right now are saying
Charlie
they
Kirk's
want
podcast.
they want their own Joe Rogan on the other side. Gavin Newsom's trying it. They're trying to hype up all these other influencers. They're desperate to try and break into the market, and it's not working, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
But what you said about the news is people still go to traditional news sources many times to get what they think is factual news or just to stay dialed in. For me, a lot of times it's out of habit. When I get in the car and I take my kids to school, I flip over to KNSS. I flip over to 98.7. And for many years, it's
I see how it is. Yeah.
No.
We appreciate
Monday
that.
through Friday.
We appreciate that.
It's Steve and Ted in the mornings.
Sure.
Steve McIntosh.
Except after January,
Ted Woodward.
it'll be Woodward and Witt.
And this is the news that broke this week. Now, we're recording this here in the middle of December, but the news broke this week. I think most people know now Steve McIntosh is retiring after over
55 years.
It's incredible.
Yeah. That's an incredible radio career.
If you think about it, he covered the shooting in downtown Wichita. He was there. Remember that guy shooting from the hotel? He was there on the street. He covered BTK. I mean, Steve McIntosh is a legend.
He is a legend and a wonderful
Wichita.
human being.
Oh, and just a sweet guy. And, when they first brought me in, one of the ideas was, hey, we would have a local, assuming I didn't fall on my face or say something I shouldn't and get fined, which, for 7 years, I've been behaving myself, more or less. But that was part of the plan all along, was that if we had a proven commodity that the market didn't reject, that the plan was that if McIntosh retired, when McIntosh retired, we would do this.
Well,
and so here we are, going on 8 years later.
Well, it shows a tribute to the market as a whole, because a lot of times for people that, for myself, where this is my career, nothing against you, John.
No.
That's from, people coming in as former politicians or experts on certain industries that have come into, something like even Charlie Kirk as a podcaster coming into the radio industry, as opposed to being a radio professional, where that's what we were trained to do. It's such a different market nowadays, and it's so rare to hear someone like McIntosh that has the longevity in a market. And, there was always a joke that they always said that, you're a true radio person when you've gotten fired from multiple different radio gigs and you're bouncing around the country to different markets. So to be in a same market, to be part of that community, and to be a radio person for that long is really really honorable. I'm excited at the fact that I hit 10 years here in Wichita just, a couple months ago, which is a really big feat. So it's really neat and cool to see that type of legacy is still alive.
It is, and he is a legend. And now we have that morning drive is going to be the Woodward and Witt show. That's great news, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. And we're not changing. The format's not going to change that much. We're still going to do news, traffic, weather. But we'll throw in some new not commentary, but interview segments. For example, it may not be you, because you may not be
me next year.
You won't be the chairman, but we'll still do, Mondays with the mayor.
Yeah.
And we will do Tuesdays with the county commission. But for example, I can tease this. Every other Friday, we will have an interview with Congressman Estes or Senator Roger Marshall. That's a brand new segment live from Washington, D.C.
Cool.
Every other Friday.
Yeah.
During the legislative session on my show, we've done an Under the Dome update.
Yep.
We're going to do that now every Monday morning on the morning show, live from Topeka. We will have an Under the Dome update. That's something new that show hasn't had on the morning show. But because I'm there, we'll have more of that. And over my years on the Sunday show, I've been able to meet some folks like Tyrus and Riley Gaines. And I've got some really good relationships. Well, now we can bring those folks on the morning show.
Yeah.
So we will start bringing in a little more interviews.
Yeah.
But the content will still be essentially the same.
Yeah, and I will tell you, is every Tuesday morning at 7:35, I come on and give an update from the county commission. And it's funny because those guys, they'll want to know what's going on at the commission meeting, but you never know what they want to talk about. And a lot of times they want to talk about sports. They want to talk about baseball. I played baseball for a living. They want to talk about it. And it's just fun to talk to them. But you know how many people text me and say, hey, I listened to you on Steve and Ted. I heard you this interview. We listen to it every single morning. So that's the legacy that I think Steve and Ted have built. And pivots are necessary at times. He's retiring, and I think this is going to be really cool. And I think the market's going to really enjoy that. And I think
we're glad. I'm glad to have Ted Woodward.
Oh, he's great.
He's taking Steve's role. I'm taking Ted's role. Yeah. So we still have that consistency because Ted Woodward's still there, and Ted's going to be the driving force. And I'm coming in to kind of, play second fiddle, which is great.
Well, I love this whole conversation around talk radio and conservative talk radio. A lot of it just because of the influence it had on my life and my father's life, and just remembering listening to Rush. And it was really cool. And knowing you guys are radio guys, I always said I'd love to be a radio person. I don't have the voice, but I have a face for radio. I could probably pull that.
So do we.
Are you agreeing with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
no, we all think that way. And honestly, it takes a while to get familiar with learning to listen to your own voice, listening back to your air tracks, listening to podcasts. It's very strange, and I've always joked that, I got a face for radio and a voice for newspaper.
That's
so
incredible.
It's all right.
Oh, that's good. I like that one. What's interesting is last year we started rebroadcasting my show on Saturdays. Mm-hmm. And the first time that it aired, my wife and I were in the car, and my voice came out on Saturdays. And oh wait,
I know that. I recognize that.
I recognize, but I'm just not used to hearing it.
It's very strange.
The other one is whenever I hear my theme song, "Carry On, Wayward Son."
Yeah,
I was like, I'm on the air.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. Appreciate conservative talk radio. Appreciate the legacy that it has and the influence I think that it does still have today and the people that have made it so influential over time. Let's talk a little bit of politics. Obviously, you're not just radio folks. You're not just conservative talk radio people. You are also the vice president of, or the vice chair of the Kansas Republican Party.
Yeah.
And you're the chair of the Sedgwick County Republican Party. So aside from just talk radio, you have influential leadership positions at the state and the local level. Let's talk about that piece. What is the primary, help the public understand, what's the primary role of a state party and a county party? What is it that you do exactly, and what's the importance of what that role is?
Well, from the state level, which, John, I know you talk about it on your show. I talk about it on mine as well. We always talk about that engagement, getting active, and actually doing something to, change. And we can do that from behind the microphone all we want to, but at the end of the day, we want to live what we try to preach is, getting engaged and getting active. I've never been involved from that side of politics before. I've always been that third-party objector, that radio guy behind the microphone to get the information out, talk to people, but never actually be engaged myself. I got the call from Denidri, our chair of the state party, last year before the election, year and a half, whenever it was, and said, "Hey, Andy, I'm running for the chair of the state party," which I said, "Cool, all the power to you." She goes, "I want you to be my vice chair." I said, "Wait a second, hold on. What? You do realize I've never done this before?" But, I told her, I said, if I can be an asset, because my mission is obviously the messaging, the PR, the getting voters engaged, getting our message out, trying to counter the attacks from the other side and the talking points. And if I can be an asset to that, I want to help. So from the state party, that's been my role. And a lot of it is trying to help with a lot of our social media posts and growth, trying to create the messaging of what we want to actually promote with the conservative movement, the Republican Party, and the whole role of the state party, which a lot of people may not even know because they're like, what does the state party even do?
Right.
It's really to assist and help the candidates statewide get elected and assist the counties in what they need to do. Is really our main goal.
One thing you should point out is the way the state party is organized. One member of each of the leadership team has to represent one of the congressional districts.
Okay.
Yes.
So he represents the entire 4th congressional district.
Yeah.
Denidri's from, I believe, the 2nd or 3rd district.
Yeah.
And so he represents everyone in the 4th congressional district, all of South Central Kansas.
Yeah. So if I get a call from any of the county leaders from the 4th district, I take their concerns up to the state leadership. We figure out what to do. We try and organize stuff, working with you on, the upcoming state Republican convention. But yeah, our goal is to fundraise, to help out statewide races, and to assist in counties because, obviously the grassroots happen at the local level and the county parties are the ones that organize that local level. Our goal is there to try to assist that in the best we can through organization, through coming up with the talking points, the campaign platforms, through trying to help out the best way we can. That is our goal, and that's what right now we're trying to do for the upcoming midterm elections.
That's the state side. Is the county side different? How is it different than what they do there? What's the role? And how did you get to this point that you wanted to? You're busy. You're both very busy people.
yeah.
How did it get to the point where you wanted to do this?
I can give you the politically correct, nice answer. Or
Give me the John Whitmer answer.
Beat Democrats. That's my job.
That's your job.
That's my job. Recruit candidates, raise money, but really it comes down to my job is to beat Democrats. And that's really what it is. Our job at the county level is to, at the state house, the state senate, local level, it's to recruit candidates and then help fund and educate and train them and beat Democrats. And I've served in the legislature, and our job in the legislature and at the county level is to govern. That's your job.
Right.
But as party leadership, our job is not to govern. Our job is to win. And so that will be our focus as we, especially moving into 2026, we have a gubernatorial cycle, and again, not the primary, can't really play in the primaries, but when we get into the general, that'll be our focus.
Yeah.
And I think Andy would probably agree that Sedgwick County will be ground zero for the gubernatorial race.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. Last cycle, it was Johnson County. I think most political pundits agree that Sedgwick County is ground zero.
And I think you hear that from a lot of the gubernatorial candidates on the right now for the Republican Party. They're spending a lot of time here.
Yep.
You start hearing whispers about what their thoughts are on lieutenant governor and what that could look like. And they know that the key to winning the governor's mansion in 2026, it's going to come through Sedgwick County.
Yep.
Oh, there is. At the end of the day, there's really 7 to 9 counties statewide where you focus most of your attention on. And if you can win those, then you win the election. And we saw that with the last 2 governor's races, with Derek Schmidt at the time, with Chris Kobach prior to that. It comes down to about 7 counties, and which is really unfortunate. I don't like that. I've been promoting an idea, which is away from the Republican side of it, but just kind of a personal project of starting to create a conversation around an idea of a statewide electoral college, because I think that we're so diversified within a state that it's the same issue we see nationwide on why we have an electoral college nationally. And I think it's worth a conversation there to better represent. But the race comes down to about 7 to 9 counties, and Sedgwick County is one of the biggest ones where that is won or swayed an election in some ways or fashion. And we need to be prepared for that. So, all hands on deck. I know that John's getting ready for that one. And at the state party again level, we're just ready to give them whatever assistance they need to make that happen.
Well, it is interesting to think about the diversity in Kansas in regards to particularly rural and urban. And I met with the Deputy Secretary of Department of Corrections yesterday talking about a lot of things that we're working through. I've been very critical of some things, and they've responded, and they've come and met, and we're working on things on funding formula and such. But Sedgwick County is very unique comparative.
Yeah. Yes.
Comparative to Johnson County, which is another urban county, comparative to Shawnee, Wyandotte, rural America. It is really unique here. And what's happening here is unique from what's happening throughout the state. So I'm grateful.
And it's unique. I want to say real quickly. It's unique in the sense that Sedgwick County, in order for Republicans to win, Republicans have to win Sedgwick County. And we have to win the 4th district. The other counties like that, we don't even necessarily have to win those big areas. We just have to see an increase in voter turnout for Republicans. And overall, as a state, we'll end up winning these races overall. The 2nd district under Derek Schmidt's congressional district, we lost that governor's seat because largely of that district there by like 20,000 some odd voters that turned out for President Trump. Didn't turn out for the congressional districts or the down ballot races. And it's now the focus for Republicans that we have at the state party is how do we just get them to turn out? If we have just 20 to 30,000 more people turn out statewide, Republicans win. We dominate. We have the most amount of registered voters in the state. And in fact, there are more independents and unaffiliated in the state than there are Democrats. So there's no reason for us not to win these races. All we have to do is figure out what drives people to the polls and make sure they actually show up. And we win the race. It's really not that difficult.
Let's stay on that topic right there, because I've always said that good policy makes good politics. And that one of the things, particularly, not talking Republican Party, but conservative movement in particular, it was an intellectual movement.
Yes.
It was a party of the intellectual right. It's people that were progressing ideas and contending and debating real good ideas. And good ideas is good politics, man. Do we have good ideas from the party standpoint? Are we winning in the idea intellectual piece of this?
I think so. I mean, I worked as a paid staffer on both of the last 2 gubernatorial campaigns. And I think part of our problem is sometimes we've lost our messaging. And I'll give you a good example. Derek Schmidt's campaign. And I love Derek Schmidt. He's a great guy, class guy. But part of the problem he had is he lost messaging. If you look at the beginning of his campaign, his core message was retire free in Kansas. I don't know if you remember that, but that was the message. We're gonna eliminate income tax on retirees. We're gonna eliminate property tax for retirees and retire free in Kansas. That was his message. That message resonates not only with conservatives. That message resonates with Democrats, with independents. Yeah. That was his message. And then Dennis Pyle came along. And because of Dennis Pyle, Derek, and I remember I was in on some of these conference calls, but because of that message, he now had to, he felt, and the campaign felt that they had to now resecure their base. And so because of that, they pivoted to transgender policy. And again, the transgender issue is important, but that's important to the base. So now they're talking about women and girls sports, which is an important issue, and they're trying to secure the base. Well, when you do that, you're now off of that core message, which appeals to a broader base. Yeah. So I think, yes, we have winning issues, but the more we can preach to an issue that appeals to a broader base, I think we've got winning, because our issues win. What are the Dems running on? They're running on socialism. They're running on Mandami issues. Yeah. That doesn't appeal to the broad base.
Well, you got to remember, there's a difference between the messaging on the campaign trail and the messaging of, let's say, the platform of what the party actually stands for.
Yes.
On the radio show, I always talk about the 3 principles that we need to promote, which is life, liberty, and private property. At the end of the day, we don't need to get into the weeds. A lot of times people want to change the platform of the party and have a very specific statement on a very specific issue. We don't need that. The Republican Party needs to just stay true to the conservative values of life, liberty, private property. Period. End of story. Just about every issue that comes up, every whatever flavor of the day falls under those principles in some fashion.
Good, Andy.
Where we stand on, the candidates themselves can take it how they want to on a campaign trail. But as a party itself, if we're going to win people over, if we're going to show them what we stand for and fight for those values, we have to keep it simple. Life, liberty, private property, my 3 pillars of conservatism on what we stand for, what we believe in, and then we can go from there and use those to make our judgment based on an issue one way or another.
I think he's right. You agree?
No, absolutely. I mean, I've got similar 4 platforms on my show: limited government, individual liberty, free enterprise. If you're targeting about those things, they appeal to a broad independents and Democrats.
Yeah.
Focus on that. I think we get in the weeds. But again, it depends on your candidate.
Got to have great candidates.
Right. And I think Republicans have lost the governor's race, not because of our candidates, because we don't stick together. And I've made this argument time and time again that, and we have this problem again now with, 8, 9 Republicans.
I think we're up to 11.
In our primary.
Yeah.
If we don't whittle this down, when we get to the general, we're going to have a problem. And
not only whittle it down, but actually get along. We've had so many instances where it gets so emotional in the primaries that by the end of it, the side that loses says, well, I'd rather have a Democrat than this Republican in office because they didn't completely align. And that's something we have to stop. And
Andy, it's that, but then you've got 60 days before the general.
Yeah,
so we bloody everybody up in August at a primary, and somebody emerges. Then you got 60 days, and the coffers are depleted financially. I mean,
candidates weakened because of the primary.
I think we got to have a conversation in Kansas about that August date. And if
you know what there is, the state party, our leadership right now, we are talking about that, trying to find a way to move those primaries up a little bit, so that way they're more in line with the rest of the nation in like an April, May type of thing. So that way we have time.
Moving the filing deadline up too.
Yes,
it's
moving
June,
the filing
now
deadline.
You'd have to move it up to May or
exactly. So there is opportunity for that, because then we can have that healing time.
Yeah.
We are working this year. We made a pledge to all the governor's candidates that they're hopefully going to make that pledge that if they don't win it, they're going to endorse the general election candidate, whether that happens or not. But that's what we're asking for. We're also going to be throwing some type of Republican, harmonious get together, sing kumbaya kind of party after the primaries statewide, where we can try and heal those wounds, and come together. Because look, I love the idea. And I've always said it. This comes from my mentor, Mike Rosen, out there at KOA. He wrote a piece in the Denver Post, the Rocky Mountain News at the time, that had made the case that party trumps platform, or party over person. And he always made that case that in the general election, it's the party over the person, because by then it's the special interests, it's the money, it's the idea overall as a party over the individual candidate. And I agree with that mindset. However, I've kind of taken it from there and gone a little bit beyond that and saying that the primary election is the most important election by far, because if we are going to do party over person in the general, the primary is what sets that tone on what the party's going to stand for, what it looks like. Yeah. And in order to do that, I love the diversity. I love the debate.
It's
and I love
purifying process.
Yes, the purifying and challenging our ideas, because unlike Democrats, they get their marching orders. They don't really have a whole lot of debate, except for their civil war they're seeing right now. But Republicans overall, we challenge our ideas, and I love a primary. But at the end of the day, once it's done, we can't. I always see it as kind of like the Italian family. You smack each other, yell and scream at the dinner table, and you bicker internally. But if anybody outside the family messes with you, then you mess with the entire family. And the Republican Party needs to be like that.
Well, Reagan had an 11th commandment. I mean, never speak ill of a fellow Republican, and it was because of that. And I think, John, I agree. I think we've lost some elections because of this.
There's no doubt that we've lost elections because of it. And the problem we have is, even in this current primary, there are Republican candidates for governor who are refusing to sign your pledge.
That's right.
Who are refusing to.
Yeah,
there are.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's
here we are.
Unfortunate.
Well, let's talk about the issues then, because again, I'll say it from the rooftops. Good policy makes good politics, and we need to be a party of ideas, and the movement needs to be filled with ideas. Looking ahead at 2026, we know what the state legislature has signaled what their number one issue is going to be. Let's talk about what's shaping issues.
Interesting you say that, because I'm not sure that everyone knows what their number one issue is. So
Wow.
what do you think their number one issue is?
We have been told loud and clear that they are going to go headstrong into property taxes in this conversation about property taxes. This is what we're being told on the county level.
Okay. And yet, I would say, what more can the state do about property tax other than change the way appraisals are done?
Yeah, and to be quite frank, so we talk about that conversation, and this is me there's a couple issues I want to talk about here in regards to this. Number one, the state has already eliminated, with the exception of the 20 mils that they charge that goes to the state,
right.
They're already out of the 1.5 mils.
Which goes to schools.
It goes right to the schools.
So unless they want to deal with that, which they can't.
What they can do is the appraiser and the appraiser processes flow through the state, Kansas Department of Revenue, Property Evaluation Division. We can talk about that piece of it there. The ideas that are being floated, I'm not too keenly fond of.
I mean, like a cap?
I'm not afraid of caps on the dollar side of things. What I don't want, I do not like caps on valuations. I think it's a terrible idea for a number of reasons. The biggest reason is that the greatest asset that we own is our home, and we want our homes to appreciate, and we want our homes to value. What people don't like in the increased valuation is not that you've gotten more equity. They don't like that it typically produces more tax dollars, property tax payments. So let's actually get to the root of the problem that people are frustrated about, and it's the property taxes. It's not the valuation. But I would contend that we've got to begin at the premise, and we've got to sell to this community, which I think by and large, Republican, Democrat, Independent agrees, property taxes really have become an issue.
Oh, yeah.
I truly believe that we are in a danger zone with our working class families and those on fixed income. And it's not just because the valuations have gone up, and not just because that the 107 different taxing jurisdictions in Sedgwick County are collecting most of the appraised value growth. The biggest issue is because the inflationary environment we've been in the last 5 years. It's not just their property taxes and property insurance have gone up. It's their goods. It's their services. We are in a danger zone, and those particularly on the right need to tie every single policy back to healthy families. Yeah. And property taxes are really hurting people.
And I think
Am I right or wrong?
It is, and I think it is a priority for a lot of people, which is why how many different school bonds that have been voted on throughout the entire state since January of this year have been shot down over and over. I think out of what,
you mean
maybe
it's not because people hate kids, or
that's right. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe people do hate kids, but who knows in today's age?
It's legitimately because people
legitimately
are
concerned. Out of the 20 different some odd school bonds around the state, maybe 3 of them had passed.
Yep.
But all of them are getting shot down because even for the basic ones that normally would just go through with flying colors without a question, people are saying, no, I can't do that right now. I don't want it. I can't handle it.
We've met a threshold, John.
I think, let's be honest, the problem is government spends too much. I mean, here you go. Wichita's doing it again. The sales tax is an $850 million spending slush fund. And the problem isn't, I mean, we all want nice things. I want nice things for Wichita. USD 259 in November is going to come back with yet another $500 million bond initiative. And again, it's for spending. And I think, yes, I understand what you're saying about wanting to control property taxes, but the real solution to all of this is for government to stop spending beyond their means. Yeah. And if they could learn to control their spending, a lot of this would solve itself.
Well, let's go to a few different other communities, because you're right. Like Wichita, it's a very large budget. It's very wasteful. You can always find ways to trim it. You can always find ways, at the county, at the state level, at the city level, to try and find ways to trim it. Being a city council member of a town of 990 people, less than 1,000 people there, our entire $1 million annual budget is based on a 1% sales tax and property tax revenue in the city. That's it. And it takes us 3 years to raise enough revenue to just pave our main downtown strip in the town, which is ridiculous. So, obviously growth is a thing on there, but we don't have places to trim. So as we talk about the property tax issue, the valuations are going up way too quickly. The property taxes are going up way too much. A lot of small towns, that's the lifeblood of us actually opening our doors and doing anything. So it's finding a way to lower inflation up to where, cities like that, our small towns, can survive with the minimal amount of property tax, or get enough people in to substitute that into sales tax, which is what I would like to do, eventually. But it's a deep conversation that we have to figure out what to do moving forward.
Yeah. And in defense of Ryan and the counties and cities, they're not the main perpetrators here. I mean, you look at your property tax bill. If I look at mine, you're what, maybe 9%.
Usually about 20% total. Yeah.
So, the city is 9-10%. Goddard, where I live, 18%. It's so the schools are the primary perpetrators here.
Right.
Some are worse. I've got a buddy who lives out in Andover. They're over 20% of it. So it's massive. So that's really who your primary perpetrators here are, the schools. And so if you really want to deal with property taxes, you got to go where the culprit is.
Let's talk through this real quick. And I think it's really important. I'm grateful for this discussion, particularly with party leadership, because I think it's something that we've got to be able to vet out and talk out in an area to where we can really explore ideas. The over-dependence on property tax is what has really stretched some of this. You talked about you're dependent on it to do basic government services. At the county, obviously, I think this county is different than other counties. I think this county is different than the city in many regards. But, we are trying to forecast public safety increases. I mean, and it is significant. If you look at Jeff Easter and the jail, that 40% of every property tax dollar that comes in goes to the jail. It goes to fund the sheriff's department. It's significant. And he did a podcast with me a few months back, and he said when he first got on as the sheriff, his medical budget was $1.7 million. His medical budget that was passed in 2026, we're giving him the budget of $12 million for medical expenses.
Wow.
100% property tax funded.
Wow.
So if you look at 911 calls, they were now over 1,200 average per day. When I first got on the commission just 3 years ago, the average EMS calls per day was 180. They're now at 230 per day. The rising cost of public safety, and that's core service, and that's property taxes. So
what's the reason for that? When you look at the population growth, isn't there?
But we are a sicker population. Okay. But more EMS calls are for things like diabetes and things of the mental and behavioral crisis, which I think that COVID and the way COVID was managed certainly had a play on some of these things. Not fully, but the drug use, the types of drugs that are in the community today, particularly Wichita, the type of methamphetamine. It's a cartel meth, which is why the border does matter, particularly here in Wichita. It's a cartel meth. The type of synthetic marijuana is K2. It's actually inducing psychosis. So the mental and behavioral health challenges are more significant. The rate, you'll see public safety budgets correlate with what's happening in the family units. 82% of the kids in USD 259 live under the poverty level. The number of single-parent homes in our community, this is a real, and we're seeing correlations.
And that's why we talk about, when we talk about like these social issues, and we talk about the family values, and we talk about the divorce rates and the abortion rates and everything else. This, like you said, it correlates with public service spending that we have, and as this continues to increase massively on public service, that it's also an investment that we need to look at to try and stop that from happening. I always use the example of you have an open wound that you go to the hospital for. Do you just get a bigger Band-Aid, or do you actually sew it up and figure out why you have the issue in the first place? We need a deeper investment on long-term issues to bring back the family values, to get rid of the demand for the illegal drugs, for these, things, to the mental health issues, to prevent them, preventative measures, the healthy issues, the MAGA movement that we're seeing right now to actually live healthier lifestyles. We do more of that stuff. We're going to need less of the public services, and we can actually cut back on spending.
I think you're exactly right. Yeah. John, you agree?
Yeah. No, I think he's right, but Andy's a bit of a crackpot on the health stuff, so he's you gotta give him a grain of salt.
But I think this is an important conversation in regards to where are we at in the Republican Party statewide. Now, listen, this is my opinion only. It doesn't matter who's in the White House. I'm not a fan of the federal government. I'm not
a fan of what?
The federal government.
We don't trust them.
I don't trust
any government.
I have a particular disdain for the federal government. It could be whether it's Trump or Biden or Obama or George W. Bush. It could be Reagan. It could be Teddy Roosevelt. It could be Abe Lincoln sitting in there, and I have a disdain for the federal government.
I think having a healthy disdain for government is probably a good thing.
Probably a good thing. Yes.
But many times what happens is we begin to look at the things that are happening on the federal level, and we throw that umbrella of things that are happening on the local level. My approach and my thought to what I want to happen at the federal level and what is not happening at the federal level, does it correlate and translate to what's happening on the local level? Meaning this, chair of the county party, vice chair of the state party. Is it good politics and good policy to basically come in and say, sorry, I'm playing devil's advocate here. We've got to cut to the place to where we can no longer have good public safety, to where people, particularly that are parents, think that we're not funding schools appropriately, which I disagree, but I'm playing devil's advocate. Is the policy approach from our local and state party the best policy for Republicans to win, to come in and say, we're just going to cut until we're down to the studs?
Here's what I would say is, and I think you've mentioned this on my radio show before, is that we have the messaging we have to have is we want efficient government at the local level and cuts and massive, just essentially hitting the reset button at the federal level. The way I want to see it is, Donald Trump teased this week, it's not going to happen, but he teased the idea of getting rid of federal income tax altogether and just replacing it with tariffs. Is that ever going to happen? Probably not. I loved that idea back in the early 1900s before we started this entire fourth branch of government with the bureaucratic agencies, but right now it's probably unfeasible to do that. But theoretically, let's just go down the world of fantasy for a moment. If we could get rid of 80% of the federal government, we get rid of every agency, every department, every service, everything, and we go back to, in my opinion, the role of the Constitution, which is essentially 3 roles the federal government is supposed to have, which is military and national defense, that is immigration and foreign policy, and that is regulating monopolies to make sure there are no monopolies through interstate commerce. Those are the 3 duties of government. That's it, period, end of story.
We are a long ways away from that.
We are a long ways away from that.
It is a fantasy, though.
That is a fantasy. If we're able to get to that point.
I'm playing it wrong. Yeah, playing it wrong.
Yeah, if we're able to get back to that point, at some point, we hit that reset button, Donald Trump overturns all the tables and just slashes, cuts everything. Then the states...
Jesus and the money changers there, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then I would be in support of the state saying we need to raise taxes for certain programs because that's the state level at the concept of federalism. The city level, the county level, we're going to do these different programs where you need to raise taxes for whatever type of service or program. Yeah. If you're going to have a social program and food stamps or whatever at a county, at a statewide level, that is where it should be done.
We're still in fantasy hypotheticals.
Yes.
I fully agree. I would rather I pay 6.5% to my state income tax, 36% to my federal. I'd rather be inverse.
Reverse it. Exactly.
I would rather
and that's
be
the way the system was intended to be. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Aware of that.
That is the system that was supposed to be. That if you want a universal healthcare system, I may not like it, but at a state level, all the power to you. Go crazy with it. The federal government's not supposed to be involved in that, and that's the way the system should be set up.
It's different in Kansas. It's different than Oregon and different than Virginia, and we reserve the right to be able to have these things and fashion the way we want. John?
Okay, I'll get back to from fantasy land to a little reality.
Practical, yes.
So you asked about, do we cut when we're down to the bone? Okay. My response to that is prove you're down to the bone. Because I've yet to have a government that actually has proven we can't cut anymore. That's, no offense, that's what I hear from elected officials all the time. Oh, we can't cut anymore. And I say it's a cop-out.
Sure. There's always ways to fine-tune.
Yes. I sat on the WOJ, the Wichita Government Efficiency, and when we made our presentation, there was much wailing and gnashing of teeth. Oh, we can't cut anymore. And I call a bovine excretion is what I would call that. That was a large load of bovine excretion that we can't cut anymore.
Sure.
There's 2% annually at the city that they spend on art. And, we can't cut that. Why not?
Yeah.
When you're facing a budget shortfall, you make cuts.
Sure.
Before you're going to ask people on a fixed income, retirees, people who are living below the poverty line to spend more of their hard-earned money, maybe you should cut art. Yeah. Maybe you shouldn't spend $600,000 on a pair of shitters, excuse my French.
Yep.
Maybe you should, okay, so that's where I'm at.
Yeah,
Before we start looking at cutting cops, we should start cutting funding for, now I'll go to the county, the zoo. Maybe we should start cutting exploration place and
that's the conversation.
Let the counties, and you've looked at this, and I appreciate that you have. Before taxpayers should be spending that, do a sales tax for that, do a user fee for that. So,
and here's the thing,
my point is, I think it could be done. We move to user fees. We move to
sales tax on
sales tax,
yes.
And I think that's the way to do it. Mm-hmm. And then when you've proven there's no place else to cut, then the taxpayers are probably willing to say, okay, tax me.
Not only that,
because we don't trust.
You're right. There's always ways to fine tune. Always, as the years goes on and technology upgrades, there's always ways to fine tune the system and make it more efficient. So you're absolutely right. Transferring to a sales tax is always a better idea as well if you can supplement it from what else is going on. Being able to cut certain programs, but at the end of the day, if they are asking for more money, then at least for me, again, going back to my original point, is if you say, hey, we need this money because we're cutting off the flow of cash from the federal level and we want to do it ourselves and be wicked wildly independent, I'm more open to that conversation as well. If we're not being beholden to the mob that is the federal government that holds that over our heads, with the carrot and saying that you can have this, but as long as you do our bidding, then I'm open to us funding ourselves on our own and just being more financially independent.
You're talking my language, man. Let me give you 2 points here, and I want to give an example anecdotally, because I actually think you can find balance in these things. And I actually think you can reduce property tax dependence and stabilize local government services. And I know this to be a fact because that's what we've done at Sedgwick County. I'll give you a couple of examples. Let me go back up a step on the sales tax versus property tax things. We have got to agree on a premise as a community that property taxes really are hurting people. We really are in a danger.
Yes.
And let me just be candid. It's not hurting my family. Okay. It's not hurting my family. My property taxes could triple. It's not going to impact my family, but it is impacting working class families. Yes. It is impacting working class families. It is impacting those on fixed income. And we now have reached diminishing returns on property taxes. So it is. And many people say, well, it only impacts the rich folks. They're asking for tax breaks and things of these sorts. Well, let me just tell you, anecdotally, I can show you dozens and dozens and dozens of messages I get from people in my district that are renters, which are 40% of the people in the city of Wichita, that property tax increases, property insurance increases, the landlord has passed through to the rent rate increases. I had a lady, a single mom, reach out. That's what they're going to do. They have to. I had to do it on my properties. Legitimately, I had a lady reach out and said, my rent has gone up $450 a month. I can't afford it. So we really are in a danger zone.
Yes.
Let me tell you about the cutting to the bone and that conversation and the decisions have to be on the local level. And I appreciate your local government experience and your state experience. You've seen these things in budgets. Budgets are hard. One of the reasons I ran for this position at the county in 2022, there were a couple reasons, but one of the main reasons was there was incredible instability at county government. We had lost a third of our paramedics since 2019. And you may say, was that really a big deal? Well, when the average response time for a paramedic or EMS is 8 minutes nationwide, and we were averaging 24 minutes in parts of our...
That's insane.
Yeah, if a child is choking or drowning or a heart attack, that's a problem.
Yeah.
911 was at 62% staffing. And now they were receiving, at that point in time, 1,100 calls a day with someone having the worst moment in their life. And they have something called dichotic listening at 911. One ear, they have someone having the emergency that they're receiving the call. The other ears are listening to the first responders while they're typing. That model is archaic. And when they were working mandatory overtime because of 62% staffing, it wasn't working. The sheriff was down 120 deputies in the jail. 120 deputies. He doesn't talk about this much publicly, but I think I'm okay to share this one. I'm going to. Well, I might have to edit it out. I don't think the community realizes how close we were to having to call the National Guard into the jail. Because of the ratio between deputy to inmate had reached a level to where we couldn't insure some things. That's how bad it was. ComCare was down over 200 full-time employees, up and down. The starting wage of a county firefighter was $14.60. I pay people at the Mattress Hub warehouses. Some of them don't have driver's licenses in my warehouses. That starting wage of $15 an hour. And it was impacting the service that we provide. Now, here's my point in that long diatribe. Here's my point. Is we came in, stabilize county government services, because as John said earlier, local government's about providing services.
Yep.
We stabilized those services. We're now at almost 94% staffing countywide. And here we are 3 years in a row where we've significantly lowered property tax mill levy and dependence, where this year we lowered 1.1 mills of property tax. There's nobody in the state that's done what we've done.
That's a prime example of how you work towards efficient government. We
can do things to where we can stabilize the service and we can reduce dependence on property tax, but you have to actually work at it.
That's it.
It doesn't come organically or naturally. You got to work at it, John. Am I right? John doesn't like that we have elephants.
I don't like that you've exceeded R&R. I don't like that you spent $10 million on a zoo barn, on an elephant barn.
So here's the thing, but it's a give and take. But it's a give and take, but it's a work in progress.
Yeah,
I mean, look, the fact that we're getting to where we need to be to actually function is great because there's always ways. There's always ways to fine tune.
That's what government is.
So So you start working to make it efficient as you try to trim it. And now that things are running efficiently, you know how the system needs to work in order to trim out the other places.
You can dial things.
You can dial things in. So you're right. It's a work in progress. And are there always ways where are like, oh, wait a second.
This is actually a good example about how you did compromise. Because
exactly.
look, if I were running the show, I wouldn't have done those things.
Sure.
I wouldn't have exceeded R&R. I wouldn't have done an elephant barn. Now, granted, those things are nice assets.
They are. And here's the balance in local government.
And I'm just a cold-hearted son
of
a gun.
You're not. And we've talked about this a lot. And what I so appreciate about John is that when he disagrees with you, you will get a text message and you will get a phone call.
Yes, you will.
But it's not personal. It's a conversation about approach. It's a conversation about this is what.
I still love you and I still vote for you.
It's all good. And we're both Jayhawks and it's all good. But the thing about it is the challenge that we have on the local level that I don't want the federal government doing a bunch of things, but I do want the federal government caring about healthy families here. Now, in my view, the best way we can care about healthy families is make sure we have a thriving economy where business can thrive here without a bunch of over-regulation and a bunch of over-taxation. That's an important piece of it. The quality of life amenities, they do matter. I do not like that they're funded by property taxes. But in 1964, the voters in Sedgwick County went to a ballot and said, we want you to open a park and a zoo. So we're beholden by law to have a zoo. And if we're going to have a zoo, we should have a zoo that is an excellent zoo. I just don't like that we fund it via property tax dollars. 30% of the dollars that come into the zoo come from people outside of Sedgwick County. Yeah. They should be funding it. So they should be helping and funding it. So that's all part of it. But this balance in local government, I always tell John, it's not as easy as just cut. Is we've got to be able to find the balance. And I think we have at Sedgwick County. I really think we have.
I don't know, maybe John, maybe we disagree on that a little bit because I see the need for the zoo. I see the need for those sorts of things and how you fund it. Like you said, I wish we could get away from the property tax, do it in a different fashion.
I love the zoo.
Yes.
I'm taking my kids to the zoo.
There's needs for that.
I think the zoo should just be funded by user fees, consumption.
It's the most popular tourist attraction, outdoor tourist attraction in the state of Kansas. I mean, it's right here.
I just think it should be 100% funded. Like the Elephant Barn's a perfect example. I think the Elephant Barn, I know for a fact there are wealthy Republicans that probably would have loved to have had a elephant barn, a pachyderm barn named after them, who probably would have donated for that. But they never asked.
But they are. See, the county only gave $2 million for the project. It is our asset. We own over 78
But that $2 million, I guarantee you, had we reached out, I could give you a couple of
here's a perfect
pachyderms who would have put their name on that.
Wealthy
There's my point. Wealthy Republicans who would have put their name on that, and now you'd have had no taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, and here's a perfect example of that. Trump's announcement of the Trump accounts for kids.
There you go.
That's a great example of this right now because, we could have had under a Biden administration or under a Democrat, they would have said the government is going to start just, putting money away like a new Social Security plan for these kids, and we're going to have this government project that's going to be great and yada, yada. And it would have been our taxpayer money subsidizing all of this stuff for essentially a universal basic income. That's the way it would have done. Trump came around and said, we're going to invest in kids in the stock market. We're going to have the parents investing in it, and major companies and corporations like the company Adele spent $26 million or whatever it was, $26 billion to fund for over 20 million kids to have a $1,000 account with now they say their phones are ringing off the hook with more people wanting to come in and actually invest and actually contribute to this. Well, and that's the thing. What we need to realize, and for Democrats and progressives listening to this that say that Republicans are heartless, that we're greedy, that all the business people and corporations don't care about people, it's a bunch of crap. And it really is because we are members of a community, Sedgwick County, City of Wichita, State of Kansas, whatever. We're a community, and we want to help anybody that's in need. If you're behind somebody at a grocery store and they're $5 short to pay for their stuff, how many people wouldn't cover that to help them out, right? We've done it many times. There's a humanity that we've forgotten. Forced taxation for charity is not charity. Forced taxation is government control in a program that's completely inefficient and doesn't work in the first place. We want to help people, and we do it through the private market. We need the assets in order to do it in the private market without the government taking it away from us, and we have to get back to that mindset.
Well, you mentioned his name. I want to talk about the president, President Trump. I want to talk generally about the conservative movement and the Republican Party and who is influencing who. I understand you're a county leadership. There's only your state leadership. There's only so much you can and should say in these situations. But I think we could have a larger conversation about, has the MAGA movement, and I talk about this a lot on this podcast, and I will get a lot of messages that are frustrated, but I think people need to understand the MAGA movement and why it attracted so many people that are not conservative. They're just pissed off people because the world is not working for them anymore. Housing is unaffordable. The minimum behavioral health challenges. I mean, the inflationary environment. They're mad, and they saw someone that could break the system, and they wanted that. That's why a lot of young voters voted for Donald Trump.
Minority voters. He reached out to Hispanics and African Americans that traditionally didn't vote
my question
Republican.
Is the MAGA movement, is this the new Republican Party? Is this how does conservatism, which this is a lean right movement, but it is not a conservative.
It's a populist movement.
Yeah. So is it changed the conservative movement?
Yes.
How do we handle this?
Yes, it is a populist movement that conservatives were rightfully so able to piggyback on because it was a more conservative populist movement. It has changed the Republican Party in good and bad ways, I think, and as a member of the state party leadership for the Republicans, it is a challenge and yet a benefit for us all at the same time because, like you said, people turned out that had normally not voted prior to. They turned out that have never voted. They turned out as independents. They turned out as libertarians. They turned out across the board with the promises that Trump had that we're going to go in, overturn the table, fight the corruption, fight the deep state, and be of the people. And in my opinion, I think he's doing that. I think that he's had some challenges. I think that the deep state is really deep, so every little gain that we have doesn't necessarily go as appreciated as it probably should. But I think he's doing a great job with his entire cabinet that he has making the wins that they are. That being said, the future of the Republican Party is up in the air right now because we're already starting to see the divide with Trump not even out yet, but people trying to claim what the MAGA movement is and the America First movement. We saw the walking away with Marjorie Taylor Greene lately, saying that she's more America First because she doesn't want to fund any foreign nation at all whatsoever, including the nation of Israel, compared to people that want to be involved in the Middle East in some fashion or help aid our allies. And I get it. America First, we want to invest in the country first. But whether people agree, disagree, that's the divide that's starting to happen. People are already starting to claim what the MAGA movement is before Trump, the person that started the MAGA movement, is even out of office. So the future is going to be the question of, will those people continue to turn out to vote after he's gone? And I think the party overall is in a better position because it's more of an open umbrella. We have people like Tulsi Gabbard, people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., J.D. Vance that were, J.D. Vance was still conservative at some point. I'm talking the ones that were Democrats, progressives that came over because they saw an opportunity to fight for freedom and their ideas. Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., people that were formerly Democrats that came over, has helped the party immensely with a more open umbrella idea on certain policies. The question is, can we hold that together as a caucus afterwards, or are we going to eat each other up like Republicans have historically done because they're in a purist view and it's either our way or you're not Republican enough?
I think this is – I don't think it's necessarily a Republican thing. I think both parties are seeing this.
I agree.
A case in point, back in the day, Joe Lunchpail was a Democrat. Joe Lunchpail, like your dad.
Yes.
The Reagan Democrats. Yep. These guys were Democrats. Union workers, predominantly Democrat voters. And
now they're voting Republican.
College, we're traditionally Republicans. That script has now totally flipped. University graduates are now voting Democrat. The wealthy are now traditionally voting Democrat. And union guys, Joe Lunchpail, the guys on the scaffolding, are voting Republican. Yeah. And I think that's because Republican platform, it's what we talked about earlier when you talked about ideas and principles. And I think as long as we, as a Republican Party, continue to put principles and platforms over personality, I think we can win. Yeah. So as long as we're talking about lower taxes, economy, the stuff, it's, remember Carville, it's the economy stupid. If we talk about that and let Jasmine Crockett and the crackpots, they're trying to drive their party so far to the left, it is not going to appeal to everyone on the middle of the road. It's not going to appeal.
I want to disagree slightly.
As we go to traditional values and the thing that matters, core principles. Why are Hispanic voters voting more and more Republican? It's not because we're pro-life. We are pro-life, but we're pro-family. But we also care about putting food on the table and help you get a job. That's what matters. Yeah. If we focus on that, we'll win. Yeah. If we get distracted, we won't.
I want to disagree slightly on that because you said policy over personality, which ideologically I agree with, but that's not the way voters vote. That's not the way that voters turn out. People went out and turned out to Donald Trump, not because he had the perfect layout step-by-step on how to actually change economic and tax policy. They voted for him because he went in and said, I'm going to make America great, and it's going to be the golden age of America.
We're talking about the future.
And it was personality.
And Donald Trump isn't the future.
No, but I think that people, the way that their mind works is they want to be emotionally connected. not attached to a tax policy, because we're dorks. We enjoy the tax rates. We enjoy the tax policy.
Let's
we
argue
enjoy
about marginal tax rates.
Yeah, we're all about that.
Yeah.
But the average voter doesn't do that. They want the personality. The race for the presidency is not who has the best policy. It's the person
That's
who
true.
is the biggest celebrity.
That's true.
And
Obama.
And now in an
W.
age... Now in an age
Trump.
of influencers on social media and people that don't have any ideas, yet that's how people vote. So now what you have to do is you have to find the person with the policy ideas, but you have to have the personality behind that to come in and just tear them apart. Democrats, the reason Jasmine Crockett's popular, the reason AOC's popular, the reason that Bernie Sanders still scuffles out of there and does his thing is because they have this charisma of saying the authoritarians and the oligarchs and whatever else they say. It drives people emotionally to want to be involved. And Republicans, in my opinion, have to do a better job at bringing up emotion as opposed to just saying your taxes are too high, I'm going to lower your taxes. Cool, but what's the emotional connection behind that to drive people to the poll? And that's what Republicans have to do a better job of. We have to have a personality with the policy backed behind it.
I appreciate that. And I talked a lot with the governor candidates. I've met with all of them now. And we've talked a lot about, please make sure that every policy has a connecting link back to healthy family.
Yes.
And as pro-life candidates in particular, yes, the babies in utero are really important and is the genesis of the movement. But we also have to care very deeply about this foster care system in this crisis and what's happening with the family unit.
It can't just be about...
We need to care about these issues. I say that we need to care and have a plan on homelessness and the housing affordability issues that are plaguing communities today. This is very much about healthy families, and that's who we are. And we win that with ideas. We win that with actually sharing good ideas. And again, good policy is good.
And messaging to the people on how they're going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. All right, State of the Union. Are you hopeful? Are you, as we head into 2026, we've got a lot of we got a gubernatorial race, we got midterms nationally and federally, we've got the counties up, we've got...
You're smiling.
I'm so excited.
He's the eternal optimist. John, let's start here.
Uh-oh.
John, are you... And I think I know where your head's at on some of these things, and I think you're excited about some things.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
But, I mean, give us the State of the Union here in Sedgwick County. There's going to be a dogfight in some of these things, particularly in the governor's race. It's going to be a dogfight.
Oh, yeah. Wow. You see, now this is where I get in trouble because I'll say something and then people get mad. I mean, what are you wanting to know? The governor's race? Are you wanting a handicap? What are you looking for?
No, I want to know the vibe, man. Listen, I would say that historically, the party up and down the ballot of whoever's in the White House in the midterm has a hard time. And we have... for better or worse, we have a very polarizing person in the White House right now. Again, for better or worse. Yep. We've got Laura Kelly exiting.
Thank goodness.
We've got a lot of people fighting right now for the governors and this vision of where they want Kansas to go. Man, it's going to be a tough battle in the midterm. Are you confident that at the end of the day that Republicans are going to win this thing?
Well, it depends on who we put forward. I think it depends on who the Republicans put forward. Keep in mind, the Dems have a fight, too.
They do.
Because Laura Kelly's picked another squishy, middle-of-the-road, milquetoast, square candidate who will not offend anybody but won't inspire anybody. And then you got Cindy Holscher, who is a bomb-throwing progressive who the left is going to love, but as a Republican, I would love to run against Cindy Holscher because she's so left-wing. She's coming around the other side. And if they nominate her, we'll beat her. But that's who the Dems don't want because we can beat her. So if they get Colson, or is that his name?
Ethan
Colson. Yeah, if they get him, then he can run as Laura Kelly in flats. So we'll see. I think they've got a fight in their hands. On our side, we've got a bunch of candidates, a number of whom will not make the debate stage. But if we get it down to a decent amount of candidates, it could be a lot of fun. There's some great candidates in this field. It's going to come down to money is what it really comes down to. This is going to be, let's see, back in 4 years ago, realistically, if you wanted to make it out of the primary, you needed $5-6 million, realistically. Mm-hmm. I think, to be honest with you, you probably need twice that now. That's the cost to play the game, to do digital, to do mail, to do a full staff.
To run a statewide campaign.
campaign, to pay for TV in Johnson and Sedgwick County. And I don't think half of these candidates can raise anywhere near that amount of money. And there are a lot of candidates that are going around saying, well, I don't need money. I'm going to run the grassroots campaign, and I'm going to run it out of – that's just malarkey. Let's just be honest. And so money is just going to be the determining factor here. So we'll see what it all comes down to. Fortunately, Sedgwick County is the host of the state convention.
Yeah, really
January
excited about
30th, 31st, February 1st. We're going to have a great convention. I can tell you, I'm not getting, I'm not betraying any secrets here. The Saturday night guest is Dana Lash. Wow. She'll be here in Wichita for the big banquet. We've got the first official debate on Friday night. So
that's a big deal.
But even that, not all the candidates will make the debate stage.
Yeah, you have to have a minimum raise to be able to make it. Yeah,
Andy can probably give you a little more.
Well, let's talk to the eternal optimist. State of the Union here. How do you feel?
I'm so excited. Look, I mean, I love the season anyways. And that's why I'm so excited not only to be on the radio, but also in party leadership to see the behind the scenes, to try and be prepared for this. I'm excited. I'm helping, with the organization for the winter convention. I'll be moderating the governor's debate that night. I think Cake TV is going to broadcast it. So I'm really excited for that, to see where we're at as a party, to see where we're at with the candidates, and to go from there. Look, nationwide and state of the Kansas, I am optimistic. This year, like you said, normally, midterm elections, the minority party usually has the advantage. They're fired up. They're angry. They want to see change. Honestly, personally, I think with how much attention the elections got this year in the offseason, they've already kind of burnt their popcorn. They've already kind of used all of the energy that they had. Their big wins was Jay Jones with the Attorney General's race after that whole scandal.
In a blue state.
In a blue state. In Zoran Mamdani. In a blue state. So it wasn't necessarily big wins for them because we already knew they were going to win those, but they were so excited to see a revolutionary, quote-unquote, candidate like Zoran Mamdani win that their entire momentum of we're going to start changing the tide and bring socialism and get party momentum, they used that this year. So, and by the way, in order to do that, how many billions of dollars did the Democrat Party, the DNC, have to take out in loans because they didn't have any cash? They're in a dire state. They don't have a platform. Their platform is anything Trump does, we're against it.
Well, and free stuff.
And free stuff.
And free stuff.
But that's their platform right now, is whatever Trump's against, whether it works or not, they're against it. They haven't come out and said, this is exactly what we are going to do. It's been, we talked about policy versus character and personality. They don't have any policy. They're only personality right now, because what I've seen is the structure of agencies and departments and programs, homeless programs, drug prevention programs, everything that they've done, crime prevention programs, everything that's been an institutional millions of dollars nationwide is crumbling. In 10 months, Donald Trump ended crime in Washington, D.C. with the National Guard.
Close the border.
He's been able to close the border in less than a couple months. He's been able to get criminals off the streets in multiple different areas. And that's what they were supposed to be doing in the first place. And we just showed we could do it within months by actually going in and getting it done. So these programs that they've promoted as their platform of this is what we're going to change with a new multi-million-dollar program, a salary of $300,000 to try and prevent a tent city in L.A. while the tent city continue to grow, doesn't work any longer. And if we're able to showcase that, it's game over for Democrats. Now, for us here in the state of Kansas, we've talked about, how the Republicans shouldn't beat each other up too much to where we're going in too divided. But I'm optimistic, even if we get a quote-unquote moderate candidate for governor, if we get someone middle of the road as opposed to a more conservative person, we have a supermajority of Republicans in the legislature. All they literally have to do is rubber stamp what the legislature wants to get done as a Republican caucus, and we can get things done. So either way, I'm optimistic about what the state of Kansas looks like. I know we're going to have some pretty hard races. There's a rumor Governor Kelly may be jumping into the Senate race along with some others. Along with possibly Sharice Davids, along with possibly what is his name, Trooper Ben or something from the Kansas Highway Patrol. There's a few names that have been floated out for the Democrats, and Republicans have held the Senate seat in the state of Kansas for 100 years. So, as party leadership, we don't want to break that record.
Dr. Marshall will be fine.
But again, if we do what we say we're going to do, if Republicans in D.C., if Republicans do what the Trump agenda has been and they start codifying what Trump's worked on, if we show that Democrats have zero platform, I'm honestly not worried. We have to work hard like we're always behind, but the eternal optimist in me shows that we're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate the optimism too. I am optimistic, particularly on the local level. I'm optimistic on the state level. As you know, the federal government, I have a particular disdain for. I'm very frustrated. I feel like sometimes the conservative movement is not shaping the Republican Party as it should.
As it should. The conservatives have been run out. Yeah, the conservatives have been run out almost like libertarians out of the Republican Party. You know, Ron Paul that got run out of the Republican Party as a libertarian, and now, you know, and not now I'm saying, but prior to this populist movement, you know, Rand Paul was almost on the way out. Ted Cruz was a minority in there. We had people like John McCain and Jeff Flake and, you know, all these guys that were complete, you know, the establishment running people out that had principle.
A lot of neoconservative big government.
Very much
ran
so.
up a $38 trillion debt. These are the
very
issues.
much so.
Never reformed anything that we...
And we're getting better.
And this is why I was so frustrated a couple weeks ago with the Thomas Massey thing. I was very frustrated on the Thomas Massey thing because Thomas Massey is a principled conservative man.
Yes.
And I hated seeing the infighting with Thomas Massey. I really hated that because he is someone that is in the movement conservative base. This is a guy who is, you know, he studied Edmund Burke. He's a Bill Buckley kind of guy. This is the movement conservative.
That's the movement. Now, here's the thing, and I love Thomas Massey right there with you. I love Rand Paul. There's some of my favorite people in there. The only thing I wish they would do is I wish they would find a way to be more productive in how they get their agenda across.
Amen.
Because you cannot be a no vote on everything and just be a no vote.
Yeah,
and if you're able to actually say, hey, we're gaining 60% of what my agenda and goal is here and voting for that, I would be for that.
That was Reagan's philosophy.
Exactly.
I'll take the 60 and then I'll come back.
Ideologically,
and fight for the 40.
I completely 100% agree with those guys, and I wish we could get to where they want. I do not like the infighting. I don't like the attacks from President Trump on that because we're all on the same side here. We're all going to do the same thing and work towards the same goal. They just have to find a way to be more productive in advancing their agenda.
Yeah, I agree. Man, there is so much. I would love to be able to talk about this, the Wichita Ford sales tax plan. I would love to talk marijuana policy. That's a big conversation that we have throughout
that
the
would
state
be one
right
that Andy and I would probably disagree on.
Yeah, I mean,
would be my guess.
it'd be fun to have those kind of conversations.
While he chews an edible.
That's not allowed here, John.
Yeah. But nonetheless, let me tell you what I appreciate. I appreciate deeply that you, because I know how busy you are. You're growing your radio show network. You are now promoting and moving into a different realm with radio, and yet you still serve. You're city elected. You are a state legislator. You serve in leadership positions. I'm so grateful that people are willing to step up and serve. I'm grateful that people are willing to step into positions and contend for principles and values, what Russell Kirk called the permanent things in the conservative movement, and contending for the traditional values that make Kansas, Kansas. So I'm just grateful for that. I appreciate our relationship. I appreciate that when you don't agree, you let me know and we talk. When you and I, we went on the show and we talk things up.
We have a lot of fun.
And man, but that's what's so neat. We need more communication, not less.
It's happened less and less lately, I've noticed.
I appreciate that. Yes, thank you. That's been helpful. No, he's mad at the city. He's not as mad at the county anymore.
I'm not mad at this. Well, actually, yeah, right now I am.
But I appreciate you guys. I appreciate the relationship. Thank you for coming in here, getting some radio guys in here, getting on a podcast. I think
it's a blast.
Really cool.
It's a lot of fun.
My pleasure.
Man.
Anytime.
So I appreciate you.
Love you, brother.
Appreciate
Merry
you,
Christmas.
Andy. Yeah, Merry
we
Christmas.
do say Christmas, by the way.
We do say Christmas.
Yes.
That's right.
Well, God bless you both. I appreciate you.